Another day, another news piece about YouTube getting royally screwed in the bed they so lovingly made for themselves. It is stupid, isn't it, that somebody who basically does YouTube full-time is so chipper about watching the company get dragged through the courts of various nation-states and having massive fines levied upon it, yet... well, I suppose that's what happened when you treat your de facto employees like garbage for a few decades. That, however, is a subject for another video at some point. What is happening here is that a Russian court has found YouTube guilty of illegally blocking a Russian news channel, Zagrad TV, a news channel owned by a sanctioned Russian businessman. Apparently, the US has said that he is guilty of funding pro-Moscow separatists in the Ukraine. Now, I have no idea about any of that. So I'm just going to be assuming that both parties are correct in this matter, both Russia and the US simultaneously, whilst also assuming that Google is invariably in the wrong. I know, perhaps not the most charitable interpretation, but, well, it's YouTube. Google is the subject of a Moscow court order obliging it to unblock the YouTube account of Zagrad TV, a Christian Orthodox channel. I didn't even know those existed, owned by Konstantin Malofev, who is the person that is being accused by the US and EU financial, or is under US and EU financial sanctions. Now, Google is currently considering whether or not they should appeal this decision, which would see them fined $1,000 each and every day until the 1 week mark. And if they haven't complied with the court order sanction within a week, then the fine will be doubled. And so it'll go week after week after week until eventually even Google will presumably start to feel the strain of paying $2,000, $4,000, $8,000, etc., etc. Not to mention, at some point, I'm pretty sure that the person who are receiving the fines will be earning more from that than the YouTube accounts. It is a highly alternative way of monetizing YouTube, but not necessarily an ineffective one. Now, the real thing that I wanted to talk about here isn't necessarily this, because this is currently on hold. The owner of the Zagrad TV channel has apparently called off their negotiations with Google, accusing the company of dragging their feet and not negotiating in any kind of good faith. That is also, you may remember, what landed Google a massive fine from France as well, which basically determined that, yeah, Google, you're not actually negotiating in good faith, ergo, there you go, so there is certainly some precedent there. But what I want to talk about here is Google right now, to be fair, is in a somewhat sympathetic position because they're in between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, the US and the EU, etc. are saying, no, we have legal sanctions in place on this individual, and so you are going to have to comply with these fairly broad and widespread economic sanctions. On the other hand, of course, you've got Russia saying, we don't recognize the legality of these sanctions. Weird, that. And so if you block this person, you are in violation of Russian law. Regardless of whom YouTube sides with here, they're going to be in violation of law in a pretty darn major portion of their user base. But the annoying part is this, again, never needed to happen. And I want to emphasize this point. I know I've been mentioning it on and off in previous videos, but Google was the one that decided to start getting involved in actual real-world legal questions and politics. They were the ones that started to go, oh, we need to be an ethical corporation. We need to deal with the political and legal issues of the day, don't we? Well, you got what you asked for. You are now considered a legally involved entity, Google. Which means you're no longer a citizen of the internet. You are no longer a detached third-party entity that exists out there and whose only real job or objective is to simply go, no, we're a platform, we've got nothing to do with any of this nonsense, nothing whatsoever. We are completely neutral, and will leave up literally anything and everything, so long as it isn't, literal executions and terrorist content, though. I would like to point out the Taliban still has a Twitter account. So, even the whole terrorist content thing is certainly open to interpretation, shall we say. And on a side note, I do, granted, I mean, this is an old sanction against this person levied in 2014, so this is absolutely ancient, of course, well before the US decided to arm aforementioned terrorist group with more Black Hawks than 66 other nations. God. Oh, the whole Afghanistan thing is... On the one hand, it is ridiculously sad to see 20 years of labor, of sacrifice, and in some cases genuine goodwill be flushed down the toilet. Just like that. And at the same time, God, it's a little bit funny, isn't it? What can you do but laugh at this point? Anywho, to return to the point here, make absolutely no mistake, the rod that is currently being belted across Google's back is one entirely of their own making. They wanted to be a part of this. They wanted to be a part of all of this nonsense. And here they will. These US and EU sanctions were levied in 2014. YouTube and Google decided to block the account in 2020. Alright, so it clearly isn't simply that Google is like, right, there is a sanction against this person, and like good citizens of the United States and the European Union, we are going to comply with these sanctions. No, this happened, 8 years later? Rightio then, so, what's exactly going on here, Google? Now, just to bear in mind as well, I haven't looked into this too deeply, so maybe the Zangrad TV account was only made in 2020, in July 2020? Possibly, but it had 1 million subscribers. Maybe it's one of those absolutely insane overnight successes, but somehow I doubt it. Maybe Google only found out about it in 2020, which also 1 million subs, and only then you were like, let's look into this. I remind you, Google are supposed to be verifying everyone when they're monetized, so I don't really buy that as an excuse either. This very much so seems like one of those occasions where Google decides like, alright, the whole ethical company thing. Well, this person has been decided to be a naughty boy, right? Like a certain other person whose name literally cannot be mentioned, or a certain Voldemort virus for a while, etc., etc. Once more, I lament the ever-increasing number of Voldemort words. And so, they are getting screwed by 2 legal systems. Man, I hate this as well, because in an ideal world, an internet-based solution, a company like YouTube, its only real obligation to anything should be to, we're just gonna throw up our hands, anyone can use our platform for pretty much any reason, with a handful of legalistic exceptions, like, again, terrorist content, straight-out executions, snuff porn, etc., the usual. But beyond that, we're just here. We just exist on the internet, and we don't really recognize anyone's legislation on this. If you want to block us, then, be our guest. This would also give YouTube a near unassailable PR position. Russia would think twice about deciding to move against Google if they had adopted such a stance, because who wouldn't defend them? They would be defended by pretty much everyone, certainly every independent content creator, which would then put pressure on governments. It would be seen as a moral good to defend a true bastion of free speech and freedom in general. Yet instead, here I am saying, good Russia. Screw them. Screw them until they learn their lesson and simply just back away from it all. It's such a ridiculous position. I mean, Nobody's praising China for what they're doing. Nobody's like, oh, China, wonderful. You've created an internet firewall, the Great Firewall of China. This is a lovely thing. No, even most Chinese people are like, yeah, it's a bit far, isn't it? But, well, what can you do? For now, I again hope that Google gets another mounting fine levied against it until it starts to realize that it's not the US suing them for this. It's not the EU suing them for this. Hey, Google, we noticed that you haven't been complying with our trade restrictions for 8 years. No, it's Google suddenly deciding to unilaterally go, oh, this is a good enough reason to remove a Christian Orthodox channel and slap a block on it. Again, I can't help but smell some alternative motivations there. Anywho, do let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Whether or not this is justified, whether or not YouTube should be levying restrictions on the order of the US and the EU. Hell, I can see certain arguments for why they should, and certainly others for why they shouldn't. Until next time, I've been Ash. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.